in the current era of Valorant, we have seen our fair share of teams and regions upsetting the fragile, ever-changing balance in the VCT. But when looking back towards the earliest years of Valorant, that wasn't always the case, with Europe and America seeming like the only ones really able to compete and take home trophies. That was until early 2022 in Masters Reykjavik, when this one island nation threatened to take it over with a team filled with promise that Japan since then has not seen again. This is the story of Zeta Division's unexpected rise that almost shook up pro Valorant forever. Zeta, before the 2022 season, did show up in a Masters event at Berlin as the Japanese representative after upsetting Crazy Raccoons, but didn't do much, falling out in only 2 matches. But this was a very different team than the one that would be locked in Valorant history. This team would be built over the off-season of 2021. This whole plan to take over Pro Valorant started around one player, their IGL and star Opper Laz, who along with Initiator Crow were the only remaining members from the Masters Berlin roster. Going into the offseason, they knew what their first role they needed to fill was. As while Laz had been a great Opper previously, in the current meta with only Jett being able to use the Op efficiently, Zeta always hurt on the Jett role, with her IGL, Retta, the year prior, having to pick up the role since Laz didn't fit well on her. This forced Zeta to look heavy for a natural Jett player that could just focus on entrying rather than calling the game. In Japan, there were a few good options for this role, especially with pre-Paper Rex something lighting up Japan. But when looking at who would be the best fit long term, they went with the lesser known player Depp, who with the Op was deadly with insane multi-kill ability whenever he dashed through a choke point. The year prior, he had competed with Reject, where they were unable to finish all that high in challengers. But still, individually, he put one of the highest KDs and first kills to death ratios, which really sealed that he'd be joining as the much needed Jett specialist. Then to fill in the supporting roles as controller and flex player, Sugar Zero and 10 joined together from the surprising North Eption team that just last year were inches away from qualifying for champions, drastically overperforming and putting them in the limelight as promising Japanese talent. Laz and the org regard them as such and brought them in to fill out the roster, giving them a mix of experience and playstyles that could either lead them to trophies or ruin. So these would be the 5 who take on the world for Japan, becoming the ultimate underdog in another island nation. But before they can even dream about competing for Masters Trophy, they first need to figure out if they can mesh together on the server and overcome their regional opponents with these new faces around Laz. In their open qualifying matches, they were untouchable, as the Chamber Jett combo was quickly becoming the meta, giving Laz the perfect opportunity to use his opping abilities with Depp, continuing on the post-nerf Jett that still allowed him to dive deep onto sites and get absurd amounts of first kills. They were pushed to a map 3 against North Eption, but the result was never much in question, as they aired on aggression, executing sites on Fracture with ease to qualify for the Challengers playoffs, where one spot lay ahead of them for the taking, as after blowing out the second-ranked Japanese team, Crazy Raccoons, it looked like the only hope the other teams had to go to Reykjavik was if they got Laz and Depp on a bad day. But even when that happened, 10 and Sugar Zero both had the ability to pick up fragging duties and continue the highlight reel plays, with them ending the grand finals against Crazy Raccoons, with them winning 8 of the final 9 rounds to overcome their only real regional competition for the 4th time in a row. With that, excitement overflowed for this team as Crow and Laz would once again get to compete and redeem themselves on the international level, and the rest of the team would for the first time get to experience what it takes to be the very best. While there was a lot of hype and hope for this team in Japan, outside of the country, no one really thought much of the Japanese representatives in a major event, even if they were undefeated at home, because both in Valorant and in previous FPSs, Japan has never really been a threat. They may have the occasional solid team that can take over the country, but never make noise internationally. So why should this Zeta team be any different? That was the overall thought for this team going into Reykjavik, as while many other teams were being hyped up, Zeta would surprise viewers if they even won a map. This became even more clear when the groups were announced, with him in a group with DRX and Fnatic, 2 teams that looked ready to take the season over after coming up short internationally the year before. Only Ninjas in Pajamas looked to be someone they had a chance with. This fact only became clearer when they were humiliated by DRX in just over an hour and a half, and them now having to face off against Fnatic, who looked to take out their anger on them in the elimination match after coming out sluggish with their stand-in against NIP. But on the opening defending side for Zeta, they're able to start 8 of the rounds with the first kill, as Laz was able to pick off Fnatic anytime they overextended. This was enough for them to just trade rounds in the second half and win Fracture. Icebox was a bit closer and Fnatic might have won with Durka, But with the stand-in, they weren't at full strength as Laz yet again would lead the way in the end for 4 straight elimination wins with the Chamber Op to pick up their first ever international win in surprising fashion. They were now in the perfect position to move into playoffs and become a real dark horse, as they were now facing NIP, who did do better against DRX and Fnatic than Zeta did, but Zeta had something NIP would only wish they had. They had 2 opping demons with Laz and Depp picking up 12 opping kills through 3 maps, with them probably winning by a lot if they didn't give up so many clutches. Still, everyone on Zeta worked together with them needing an insane map from Ten and Laz in overtime to move on to playoffs. And while spirits were high, when it was revealed who they'd play in the opening playoff game, they were given one of the easier draws as G2 weren't regarded too highly. As while they were doing well regionally, at the present moment, EMEA outside of FPX, who couldn't go to the event, didn't seem as good as the year prior. And especially coming out cold with no warm-up, Zeta thought they would start off the playoffs hot. But that wasn't to be, as G2 shut down TenZ's Raze on split, then picked up both needed pistol rounds to sweep Zeta right away, silencing fans' hope that Zeta might become a dark horse right away. As at this point, many would have seen that while Zeta unexpectedly made the playoffs, Japan wasn't really able to do anything on the global stage yet, since there could be something said about their path to playoffs being easier than most in the tournament. These could have all been things placed on this team if they stumbled out of the playoffs without making any impact. But here is where they would threaten to take over Pro Valorant, and it was behind Laz's Tour de Force, as they put on a spectacular 3 elimination game run, facing a gauntlet of a Scream-led Team Liquid, a rematch against DRX, and a PaperX team 1 tournament away from truly becoming a top team in the world. And the highlights speak for themselves, as while a lot of them came from Laz, Depp, and Ten on the Duelist, Sugar Zero was pulling some crazy multi-kill numbers, and Crow was dominating on the support role, with them first defeating Team Liquid winning Fracture and Split convincingly, as Sugar Zero was a nuisance on the attack, with him at one point going 14-1 in the half. Then in their rematch against DRX, they avoided Haven, while DRX banded Zeta's best map in Fracture, to actually leave them in maps that were perfect for Laz and Depth in the Chamber and Jet, going off to win in the final rounds of regulation on Icebox, then blowing out DRX and Split, with Ten dropping 18-6 during the 10-2 defending half, as Zest could not plant when he was being bombarded with util, leading them to eliminate DRX to unexpectedly grab everyone's attention even as Optic and Loud were clashing in the winner's side. Then to finally secure an unbelievable top 3 finish for the first time in the Pacific since the first International Masters, they defeated PaperX, but in a much different way than against DRX, as while they tried the same strategy of putting Deb and Laz to get opening picks on Icebox, PaperX's strats put Laz in too many situations where he either needed to get a headshot on the first shot or become the first killed. This caused him to die first 6 times to put them in a hole, losing their map pick of Icebox with their Dark Horse run looking all but over. This is when Japan's only hope put the nation on their back and came out as the #1 Pacific team in the event, as Depp played next to perfect jet play on Haven, as Zeta just outcalled them with PaperX completely overcooking their comp to give Zeta the confidence to win split at the end with Laz and Sugar Zero on controllers being the difference maker against W Gaming. An absolutely absurd run against the best teams in the world after coming in with 0 expectations from the international audience, with their total of eliminated teams from their own hand reaching 5. They would now be up against their hardest opponents left, the Prime Yay Optic team. They just needed to win their best of 5 to turn the Valorant world on its head and compete for the trophy, something no team outside of the Americas and Europe has done so far. Right from the beginning it was close, as after Zeta jumped out to a 5-0 lead, Optic fought back behind Marved, who was otherworldly leading to overtime. Maybe Zeta would have won if they followed their instinct like Optic and kept Laz on Chamber. They would have won more of these defending rounds, but on KJ, he wasn't able to have a big enough impact, with Sugar Zero being an anchor on Astra, with Dap forcing a second overtime, but they couldn't pull it out to lose on Haven. On Zeta's must-win of Fracture, they were unlucky to be so good at it because Optic was also really good at it, as Victor's Neon was just ahead of its time, being too unique for Zeta to be able to slow it down to put them in a deep hole of 0-2. Zeta tried to keep their underdog hopes alive, but were swept to finish in 3rd place. As while they thrived under this meta, Optic thrived on it more, as they went on to sweep Loud to lift the trophy. So close for Zeta and Japan, yet so far. While this run didn't put Japan on the map right away as a powerhouse, like what happened in China after EDG won the trophy, It did energize the scene for a bit to give them a blueprint of what is possible if a Japanese team builds a team at the right time and gives them the perfect storm of events to make a deep run again like Zeta in Reykjavik. As after this improbable dark horse run, they're never able to make it back to this level, as have no other Japanese teams. As since then, no Japanese team has made a top 4 finish, with the closest being a 9th to 10th place finish by Northampton in Copenhagen, as Japan has really struggled to regain their footing since franchising has started. Most of this team continued to play together until it was clear it wouldn't work anymore, with Crow moving to become a coach, with Ten recently playing with Fennel, almost making it to the Pacific Ascension, with the biggest news from this team being the retirement of Laz from Valorant, ending a legendary career in the country, with only Death and Sugar Zero left from this roster, where they hope to once again put Japan on the map after other countries nearby, like South Korea and China, have been becoming the powerhouse countries going forward, as Japan gets further and further behind. It seems they need another Zeta Division Dark Horse run to jumpstart this inspiring region.